Greetings, curious acolytes of the Force, and welcome back to our archives. Out of all of the classic lightsaber forms, Form 6 Niman is one of the most curious and difficult to understand of them all. The description that we get for Niman is that it is a hybrid form that takes aspects of the previous 5 forms, excluding however Makashi in order to create a moderate, balanced style that focuses on relaxed blade work and is the favored form of those who do not use their lightsabers very often at all. Niman is one of those that has a hard time finding its place among other lightsaber wielders, especially during times of open war and conflict. In fact, it is even said that both the Jedi and Sith actually seem to despise the form altogether. That being said, it isn't as though Niman is completely ineffectual. There have been several Jedi and Sith Blade Masters that have made great use of the moderation form in live combat, even going so far as becoming some of the best duelists of their individual eras. But in this holocron, we are going to examine Form 6 and figure out why it is treated with such contempt among the wider lightsaber wielding community. But first, we have to analyze Niman itself, and we will do a quick review of our own of the form from a non-biased standpoint, and then get into the notable practitioners, before coming to the conclusion if many Jedi and Sith are right, and if Niman is the least of all of the lightsaber forms. As stated before, Niman was something of a hybrid form that took aspects of Forms 1, 3, 4, and 5. The idea behind Niman is that it would create a perfect balance between offense and defense, therefore being aptly named the moderation form. Practitioners of Form 1 Shi-Cho complained that the form was in need of updating. Form 3 practitioners desired more options for offense, and users of Form 4 and Form 5 needed a better answer to the fact that their aggressive styles often left them wide open to a counterattack. The answer to all of these complaints was Niman, a style that had actually been adapted from the lightsaber form by the same name, which was practiced by the ancient Dark Jedi. This group is known as the Legions of Leto during the First Great Schism. This basic was taken, updated, and adapted into the 6th form that we know today. The focus of Niman was about simplifying the moves of the previous 5 forms, of course again excluding Makashi, into a style with more relaxed blade work. The result was a style that was adaptable for almost any situation that a Jedi may find themselves in. The main draw and perk of Form 6 was that it was a jack of all trades, and had a very utilitarian way of going about things. It eschewed much of the fancy flourishes for more practical and reliable blade work. This caused Niman to boast that it had no significant weaknesses, but at the costly price of having any special advantages either. While it covered the issues of the overly offensive styles, it lacked their full power and momentum. And while it made up for the shortcomings of the more defensive styles, it fell short of their total protection. Either way, the more simplistic moves of Niman did provide users with something else to help them in combat: the use of force-based attacks. Typically, the reason that we rarely see lightsaber combatants breaking up their blade work with force attacks is because it often takes a lot of focus for a Jedi to summon the power of the Force. They need their mind clear and their concentration high. Sith have an easier way of using force mid-combat because they can draw upon their excitement and bloodthirst for power. Usually, we see only experienced Jedi Masters using the Force while dueling with lightsabers. However, Niman has the unique capability of allowing Jedi to utilize well-placed telekinetic strikes interwoven with their blade combos. In fact, many Jedi will actually dedicate a portion of their combat training to the study of Niman, if nothing else than to at least gain some experience with using the Force mid-combat. The simplistic and balanced motions of Niman are also an excellent starting point for those wanting to learn the dual-wielding substyle known as Jar Kai, an offshoot of Niman. Popular practitioners of Form 6 are usually delegated to the Jedi Consulars, those who only need a rudimentary understanding of the lightsaber since they don't often wield it, and it is because of this that the moderation form is known more colloquially as the diplomat's form. Interestingly, even Jedi Sentinels preferred to use this form, specifically if they went undercover for long periods of time. With that said, there have been a rather curious number of those on both the Jedi and Sith who have used Niman to great effect, despite many others looking down upon it. One of the primary of these being the Jedi Battle Master of the Clone Wars era, Sindralig, a man who was truly the master of all 7 forms of lightsaber combat, and is the main combat instructor of the Jedi Order. Despite knowing all of the forms, Sindralig chooses to combine all of them into his knowledge of Niman, and it is because of this he had an absolutely devastating level of skill. On the Sith side of things, there are two in particular who use Niman, that being the Dark Lord Exar Kun and Kasim, as well as later on, most notably, Darth Krayt. Exar Kun used an unusually aggressive variant of Niman contrary to the form's typical emphasis, and focus on moderation and balance. However, Exar Kun chose to weave in Sith spells and devious trickery into his style. His double-bladed lightsaber had the function of being able to change the lengths of the blades at will, which allowed Exar to suddenly surprise his opponents. And following this, Kasim was actually the lightsaber instructor of the Dark Brotherhood Sith Academy on the world of Korriban, and the direct cheater of Darth Bane. Blade Master Kasim was so adept at Niman that he ended up almost winning a duel with Bane, forcing the future Dark Lord to resort to a force-based attack in order to kill him. With all of these perks, it would seem as though Niman was the right form to choose for just about anyone who wanted an all-around, reliable style. Unfortunately though, the simple fact wasn't this. Niman carried the reputation of being heavily criticized by the larger population of saber wielders. So why is this based on what we just explained? The reason being was that in times of peace, it was very useful, but in times of war, it basically resulted in a Jedi or Sith practitioner being totally exposed and very openly weak. In open combat, Niman suffered as it was not very good when surrounded with multiple enemies, especially blaster-wielding enemies. In one of the most humiliating defeats in Jedi history, the Battle of Geonosis, the Jedi made it out with only 14% of their entire fighting force when they went in. Every single Jedi who was a practitioner of Niman was a part of those killed in the ensuing battle. Since then, Niman barely saw any use in the era of the Clone Wars, as far as the Old Republic goes, and before, Form 6 just didn't have it when considering the types of opponents that the Jedi and Sith were having to face on the regular. For instance, let's go way back before the era of the Clone Wars, during the time of the Great Galactic War, a time when the Sith were just as plentiful and powerful in resources as the Jedi were. In this era, having a solid grasp on blade-to-blade combat was paramount. If you weren't a competent duelist, you were not going to survive. When faced against an opponent with total mastery over one specific form, Niman had the issue of just completely crumbling. It could hold you out against someone of a more aggressive style, but only for a little while. The direct counter to Niman was Makashi, the duelist form, and a master of Makashi could very quickly and easily overwhelm and dispatch a Niman user, as the relaxed blade work was simply no match for the surgically precise motions of Form 2. It quickly became obvious that when one was a jack of all trades, they were a master of one. They would therefore get quickly annihilated when faced by those who were the master of one. Niman is the kind of form that is excellent at dispatching street thugs and taking care of low-intensity situations, but the open battlefield is a horse of a completely different color. Considering all of this though, what about the masters of Niman? The individuals like Exar Kun, Sandralig, Kasim, and Darth Krayt. It is true that all of these men were absolute terrors at the blade and racked up insane reputations for their legendary skill, with Exar potentially being considered the greatest lightsaber wielder to ever touch the blade. Well, the thing about this is, Exar Kun, as we established, used many types of trickery and sorcery in his blade work, while also using an exceptionally aggressive style of Niman. Individuals like Kasim, Sandralig, and Darth Krayt did something very special. You see, they both already were masters of all 7 forms of lightsaber combat. Niman, in and of itself, was created as a hybrid form of most of the previous forms. Those who learn Niman by itself will only get the rudimentary understanding of the forms that are being hybridized. However, if you take someone who already has a mastery of those previous forms, and you provide them with a way to perfectly mix and match their knowledge together, this will result in a duelist who is able to rapidly switch between styles at will, and make the most out of everything that they already know. A strong foundation is necessary to become a master of Niman. But to further hammer home this point, let's take a direct quote from Sandralig. He stated, "If one were to desire to master Form 6, they should expect to study it for at least a decade." The reason he says this is because when you want to master Form 6, you're not just mastering one form, but the previous 5 forms that came before it, even studying Makashi to learn how to repel it. Not very many Jedi or Sith were willing to dedicate the time and practice it takes to get that level of understanding, and therefore never see Niman reach its full potential, as this is very, very rare. If you think of it in the grand scope scope of things, there are only around 4 or 5 individuals that have ever really mastered Niman in all of Star Wars, and it either represented a group that were some of the greatest lightsaber combatants that have ever existed in all of the lore, or an absolute massacre. In the end, those that typically wielded Niman were ultimately subpar. But anyway, my friends, this is why both Jedi and Sith typically despised, or rather dissuaded those from wielding Form 6. I hope you enjoyed this style breakdown, and if you like this analysis of this type, be sure to comment down below on the other forms you would like to see. Until next time, my friends and acolytes, thank you for visiting the archives, and may the Force be with you.